So, welcome everyone. This is the workshop on how to apply for the travel grants for the spring cycle of 2026. My name is Diogo Pinheiro. I'm the Assistant Director for CURCA, and with me here today is Alison Grindal. She is the Program Coordinator for CURCA. And so we're going to cover all the bases in terms of how to apply for the travel grants and how to proceed if you do get a travel grant, right? And so uh, let's begin with the simplest bit of information. The travel grants spring cycle for this semester covers travel that happens from January all the way up to September 30th, right? So it is a pretty big margin of time. There will be some overlap, right? So, for example, stuff that happens in September, you can also apply for the fall cycle, but this spring cycle is the ideal for this type of date range. So let's start out by talking about the most important bit of information about these travel grants, right? If you would like more information in detail about these travel grants, you can go to our website, the ung.edu/CURCA, and in the For Students menu, you will find the fall and spring travel grants, right? And so there you're going to see the link to the application page, the basics, the rubric, etc. Right? And so we're going to cover a lot of that information here today. But if you do have questions, make sure that you check out our website. Right? One thing that is new for this semester is that the maximum amount that we can reimburse students has increased to $600 per academic year. Right? It used to be 500, now it's 600, so we have a little bit more money to give to students. So on the CURCA Travel Grants webpage, you're going to see that on the right-hand side, you're going to have the link to the InfoReady page, right? The InfoReady page, which is the ung.infoready4.com, is going to be the place where you're going to submit all your materials for the travel grant, right? It is going to be the page where most UNG competitions are hosted. If you go there, you search for the 2026 Spring CURCA Student Travel Grants, and you will find the information there, right? Once you submit your stuff there, one thing that's important to keep in mind, once everything's completed and you've submitted everything, you will receive a confirmation email from InfoReady. If you did not receive a confirmation email from InfoReady, that means that you have not submitted, right? Sometimes students will click save but not submit, and so it's important to keep that in mind, right? Once everything's submitted, make sure that you got that confirmation email to make sure that your stuff has been submitted. The deadline for this cycle is January 30th at 11:59 p.m., right? So not this Friday, next Friday is going to be the deadline, right? And so let's talk about the items that you're supposed to have for your application, right? The first and most important bit of your application is going to be your cover letter, right? Your cover letter is supposed to be 2 pages maximum with standard font size, standard margins, right? Those 2 pages do not include the budget. The budget can go over those 2 pages, right? But the main thing is going to be that cover letter with those 2 pages, where you're going to describe the conference that you're attending. Is it a regional, national, undergraduate only? You're going to describe your role in the conference, in the presentation, right? Are you the first author? Are you a co-author? Are you the main presenter? Are you a co-presenter, right? You're going to talk about whether it's a poster or oral presentation. And then the most important thing, as we'll see in a little bit, is to talk about how this connects with your long-term career goals, right? At the end, you add a budget, and that's going to be the main part of your application, that cover letter, right? If you are a part of a student group, right? Maybe you have collaborated with other students in your research, maybe you have multiple authors. Each student has to submit their applications individually. That is, it's supposed to be one per student, right? You don't just submit one for the whole group. It's one per student, right? And each application is going to be evaluated individually. So put your best effort there. Don't just think, oh, my classmate has done a great job, so I'm just going to submit whatever. No. Each application will be considered individually. So make sure that you submit one for yourself and that you do the best job possible for that one application. Besides that cover letter, you're going to have to submit the abstract that you submitted to the conference. Now, if it's a conference where the deadline hasn't passed yet and you're still planning on applying for it, but you haven't yet, you can submit the draft that you intend to apply, right? You submit a proof of acceptance. And again, if you have not received that proof of acceptance because maybe it hasn't been decided yet, maybe the deadline is in the future, you submit a statement saying when you would expect to hear from them about acceptance. And then last but not least, you need a copy of the student travel authorization form. You should check with your department and with us if your department is using still the hard copy paper form, or if they're using DocuSign, right? If they're still using the hard copy paper form, you have to give us the original signed in ink form. You can submit it to our office in either Gainesville or Dahlonega by the deadline, right? If it's DocuSign, then you submit a copy of the electronic version that you received after everybody has signed that student travel authorization form. So talking about that student travel authorization form, here you're going to have to enter a bunch of information about yourself, right? Your name, your student ID, the travel dates, the destination. You have to provide an estimate of the costs that you're going to incur, right? So what's your estimates for lodging, for transportation, for meals, for registration, for all that sort of stuff, right? You and your mentor will have to sign it. And then you're going to have a brief explanation of how your presentation helps UNG, right? So if it is going to be the hard copy, you have to have that done by 4 p.m. on Friday the 30th. If it's going to be, and you have to drop it off in Dahlonega at Dunlap 108A, in Gainesville at Administration 111. If you're going to be doing DocuSign, we need a copy of the electronic version that everybody has signed, right? If you're going to have multiple funding sources, maybe you're getting some money from your department, maybe you're getting some money from honors, etc. Those representatives from those organizations will also have to sign the student travel authorization. With regards to the estimation of costs, keep in mind that it is better to overestimate than underestimate, right? If you tell us that you're planning on spending $300 and you end up spending $400, we cannot go over your original estimate, right? So it's better to overestimate your costs than it is to underestimate your costs. Now, let's talk a little bit about how we're going to evaluate your submissions and how you should write to the rubric, right? So here on the screen is the rubric that we give our reviewers to use when evaluating the submissions that students have sent in. The reviewers are instructed to go strictly by the rubric, and the reviewers are instructed to focus only on what you've submitted, right? They are not supposed to go out and Google stuff that you maybe didn't mention, stuff that you maybe didn't include, right? So make sure that you include all the basic information that we're looking for here in this rubric in your submission, right? So these 5 categories should be detailed in your cover letter. And the most important one is going to be the impact that things will have on your academic careers, right? So let's talk a little bit about each of these items in the rubric, right? The first item is going to be impact of presentation. Are you presenting at a national conference, at a regional conference, at a local conference, right? Make sure that you mention this, right? Unless it's something obvious, right? If you're talking about the Southeastern Psychological Association meeting, of course, Southeastern indicates that it's regional, right? But if it's not evident, if it's not obvious, make sure that you mention this, because our reviewers will be instructed to give a 0 to anything that's missing in the submission, right? So mention the impact of your presentation in terms of the scope of the conference, right? Is it a national conference? Is it a regional conference? Is it a local conference, right? Next, make sure that you mention your participation, right? Are you the sole presenter and lead author? Are you a co-author and co-presenter? Are you someone who is a secondary author who is not going to be presenting but's going to be there, right? Make sure that you mention your role. Once again, if you do not mention your role, our reviewers instructed to give you a 0 for that item. Next, in terms of type of conference, you're supposed to clarify whether this is a professional conference, the undergraduate section of a professional conference, an undergraduate-only conference, and so on and so forth. Next, the academic and professional development part. This is the most important part of the submission, right? It's going to count twice as much as everything else. It's going to be where you discuss how presenting at this conference is going to enhance the goals that you have for your career. Is it going to help you get into graduate school? Is it going to help you get into a particular job? Is it going to help you be competitive for some award, right? All of this information and being as specific as possible is very important here, right? Tell us about how this presentation will help your long-term goals in your career, right? And then last but not least, present the budget. And here we want to see a budget, and we want to see evidence that you researched stuff for the budget, right? So an ideal budget will have not only an itemized list of costs, but will have some demonstration that you look things up, right? Oh, this hotel, I estimate will cost this much. The mileage is this much, right? So that you have a very specific breakdown that gives our reviewers confidence that you spend some time preparing that budget, right? Now, let's talk a little bit more about the budget, right? Include everything that you're going to spend, even if it goes over $600, right? Why? Because we cannot get paid more than what you've estimated, right? Let's say that you estimate your costs will be just $350, but you didn't anticipate something and they end up being $500, right? We'd be stuck with the $350 that you originally requested, right? Now, in terms of the things that we can reimburse registration for conferences, but we cannot reimburse memberships into associations, right? So if it's a conference where you're required to pay membership and registration, we can reimburse the registration, but not the membership. In terms of lodging, we can only pay for hotels. We cannot pay for Airbnbs, VRBOs, any of those, those sorts of apps we cannot reimburse. So it has to be a hotel. And if you're going to stay at a hotel that's less than 50 miles from your residence, you have to get permission from your department chair before you do the travel, right? So if you're going to be going to a conference in Atlanta and that hotel that you're going to be staying at is less than 50 miles from your home, it's okay for you to request that lodging, but you have to get approval from your department chair before the travel happens, not after, right? And then you forward that email with the approval to CURCA@ung.edu, right? In terms of the lodging, make sure that at the end you get a receipt with the complete folio showing a zero balance at the end. Car rentals, we can only reimburse if it's through Hertz or Enterprise. Airfare, we can only reimburse the base airfare. So in other words, any upgrades, if getting a refundable ticket, selecting seats, etc., those are all extra and non-refundable. So we can only pay for the base airfare. For meals, you don't enter the cost of the meals themselves. You use the per diem rates that you can find on the General Services Administration website. If it's within state, then you have to use the in-state per diems, right? And then at the end, you provide a total and a summary. Talking a little bit about the per diem, if it's within the state of Georgia, it's going to be $50 daily rate, right? For the first and the last day, the per diem is at the 75% rate. And if it's outside of the state of Georgia, you would look at the General Services Administration website, and you would look here at the per diem for the particular city that you're going to be staying at, and you would look at the daily rate. Once again, first and last day is 75% of the last day. If the conference is going to be providing you with a particular meal, you subtract that meal from the per diem for that day, right? So in terms of the budgets, if you win the grant, before you travel, make sure that you reach out to our office and talk to Allison here to give you the reimbursement paperwork and all the details, right? Make sure that you keep the receipts that we need. Again, we don't need the receipts for food, but we do need the receipts for parking, for lodging, and for all that sort of stuff. For the hotel receipt, make sure that that you get the folio and that you have a zero balance at the end, and ideally that it shows the last four digits of the credit card that you use to pay for the hotel, right? It is okay to share rooms. It is okay to carpool, but keep in mind that we can only reimburse the people who won the travel grants, right? We cannot reimburse people who did not win a travel grant, right? So after all of this, if you've completed your travel, you presented your stuff, you came back, right? You have 2 weeks from the date that you came back to submit your paperwork for reimbursement, right? So you email CURCA at ung.edu. Within those 2 weeks, we'll give you the paperwork, we'll get that started, and then eventually we'll get you reimbursed for the expenses that you've had, right? You're going to have to get the in-state or out-of-state reimbursement form. You're going to have the student vendor form, a copy of the conference program that shows that you presented, and of course, the original receipts. If you have questions, of course, send an email to curca at ung.edu, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. So let's talk a little bit about some doubts that frequently come up, right? Can you apply for a conference or travel grant if you already graduated? No, unless that conference happens very close to that graduation date, right? Like you graduated on May 2nd and the conference was May 5th or something along those lines. Our funding is restricted to students who are primarily enrolled undergraduate students at UNG, right? So we cannot fund graduates, we cannot fund graduate students, just undergraduates, right? Seniors can apply for our funding. However, the presentation date, if it's after your graduation, has to be really close. So email us to discuss if your conference applies here, right? It's important to keep in mind that we don't give you $600 if you win. What we do is we reimburse you based on expenditures that you might get, right? So it's not just like, oh, you won, here's $600, right? You're going to have to show the paperwork that you had the costs so that we can reimburse for those costs, right? Once again, do not underestimate your expenses. We don't use the amount of money that you requested to determine whether you win or not, right? So there is no incentive for you to go under what you will actually expend. Put everything in there because, once again, as I said, if you go over the estimate that you sent us, we cannot go over the original estimate, right? If you don't, how do you know if your conference is local, state, regional, or national? You can always talk to your mentor if it's not obvious, right? Georgia something something is going to be a state conference, right? A Southeastern something something is going to be a regional conference. But if it's not immediately obvious, talk to your mentor, right? If you haven't been accepted to your conference, you can still apply. Just send that estimate of when you expect to hear from them, right? And you can submit up to 2 applications per cycle, right? If you're attending multiple conferences, submit individual ones per conference. But once again, that $600 limit that we have is for the academic year. So if you already got some money in the fall, if you get, if you're presenting at 2 conferences in the spring, at the end of the day, the limit for the year, for the academic year, is $600. And if you do get a grant but are not going to travel anymore, let us know and we'll take care of it in some way, right? So to kind of wrap it up and sum everything up, you apply via the InfoReady site. You're supposed to have the cover letter, the abstract that you submitted or that you're planning to submit, the proof of acceptance or projected date for acceptance, and a copy of the student travel authorization form, right? If you have any questions, make sure that you email us at curca@ung.edu, and we will go from there. right? So thank you all for joining us, and we'll turn now to some questions. Allison, you can stop recording.